PowerFlash GitHub account. So if you actually just go to our sources here, you'll find the sources available for this. For all these projects I'm using here, check it out, or I'm sure you just Google GitHub PowerFlasher and it'll pop right up. All right.
This is the question that I have in my head, because I saw when you said that you had a title of haXe. Sorry, that's how you're supposed to say it. I had no idea what it was. I did a Google search, and then I decided, you know what? I'm going to stay knowing nothing about it, so I'll ask the right questions instead of asking it after I actually know what I'm talking about. So my question is, like, why would I want to actually do haXe? Like, why not just stay with the programming language? If I'm in JavaScript, why not just work in JavaScript? What is the big advantage of working with haXe?
I think that is just an amazing question, and I think that's something that every person should ask themselves. Because for some people, haXe is not the right way to go. Like, so they'll just be like, why would I do that? So it's a personal preference. We've actually had at the PowerFlasher agency, we have some people who just, maybe they like, for example, I'll use the JavaScript example. Some people it just drives them nuts writing JavaScript. They just do not like it. They're prejudiced, or I'm putting words in their mouth, but I mean, get the idea. They just don't want to deal with it. They hate it, and they do kind of like the idea of having an editor, of using a syntax that's more similar to ActionScript to generate the JavaScript code for you. I do think, I will say, I'll be totally honest, that I think if you're just doing a small thing, a small project, do it in JavaScript. And again, we're talking more about the other JavaScript example. Just do it in straight JavaScript. However, I know a guy who's his name's James Jackson. You can check him out on Twitter and on the web. He is building a massive like cloud platform. So I will say he's working with a really massive project. And and he's a very proficient JavaScript programmer, and he's very comfortable. He actually really likes the idea of writing it in haXe, because he's got hundreds and hundreds of classes. It's a massive project, and for him, it makes him much more efficient to write it in haXe than doing it all in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm. So really, I'm getting out of it that a lot of it is just the workflow. So if you're more comfortable with the structured workflow, then obviously you don't have to worry about if it's PHP, which is much harder to get all the classes and names and structures versus needing to remember it by heart or Googling it each time. You just get that convenience of the same structure, even though the application that you're building is custom built for PHP. So if I'm building this haXe project and it's going to be for PHP, it's not going to be that easy for me to refactor it and make it good for Flash and good for JavaScript, right? It's not about making it easy for you to cross between languages, more than making it easier for you to work in the same workflow and the same type of methodologies. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah. Yes, that's definitely what I would say. I think some people talk about, I've heard this, even within the haXe community, there's people who disagree with each other on how to use haXe. Some say, like, oh, I just want to have one code base, like that's it, and then like push out to mobile platforms. And other people are like, I like having my my PHP haXe project and my JavaScript haXe project. Like, I'll keep the platforms separate. So I would definitely say that it is nice, though, when you do share. There are some libraries that you can share. Like, for example, if you have like a math library, I mean that's platform agnostic. Just maybe some calculations or some methods that you've done that you want to share between different platforms. That's totally doable. So especially between like Flash and JavaScript and C++. Or like you have you suppose, like, I know that there's a port of Robert Penner's Signals, right, for haXe. I think it's called the Hustle, like HXL. And that is, so you can actually use that same messaging system for Flash, for JavaScript, and for C++ even, and even I think Nico, possibly even PHP. So you can actually have the same way of having this way of working with events, one library for all these different platforms.
Very interesting. So just a couple more questions from our guests. Real-world applications, let me just stutter a little bit, but basically, are there a lot of like real case applications, or is it kind of hard to know who's actually using haXe? And are there any like sample projects of big sites or big implementations of something that we know that they're using haXe, and we could learn from their experience?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do would be to check out the haXe.org website. They have a few. It's kind of older, hasn't been updated for a little bit. The guys are working on the API right now. There are some examples there. There's a haXe group on Google Plus, and there's a few guys on Twitter floating around who talk about their projects. But you're all right. It is a little tough to know because they write it in haXe, and they don't, like when you go to a website, they don't advertise, hey, this is, by the way, this is written in JavaScript haXe. Like, that doesn't really happen too much. Actually, it doesn't happen at all. Right. No one's going to advertise that. I do know that know that among game developers that there's a ton of guys using haXe for game development for Swifts. So there's that there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So there was another question which I think you already answered, was basically, could haXe convert C++ code to ActionScript 3? So it seems like the answer is no, because really it's really more of a I wouldn't even know how to call this. It's more like there's actually quite a lot of languages that try to do this, but basically it's a language where you build your application and you convert it. It converts itself into whatever output you need it to be, but vice versa. It doesn't go the other way around. It's not like Adobe's attempt with Wallaby or other applications that try to convert from one programming language to another programming language. Unless you have something to add to that, I could ask the big question of the day, which obviously I think everyone was really excited about this topic. It was really interesting. And the next question would be, and you could always answer the first one as well, the next question would be, what is really the difference between Flash Builder and FDT, which is a question that Shami had. And by the way, Shami, send us an email at support@everythingaffiliate.com and for a little gift as well. So whoever talked publicly today, just send us an email and we'll figure out with you something from our goodie bag. We actually have quite a lot of stuff in the goodie bag, so we'll be relatively generous because almost no one actually did the Twitter stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So the first. Oh yeah. So if you remember when I was talking earlier about when I was trying to introduce the I know it was kind of like a fire hose here of information here. I kind of let off. For the haXe, it's kind of in the case of haXe to Flash, it's a compiler. You have script, output, bytecode. But for the other targets, I would say it's more better to call it a script generator or a code generator. So that's kind of how it's outputting JavaScript code, it's outputting PHP code, it's outputting C++ code. So yeah, you're right. It's not like a in between, some kind of conglomerate or together. It's just you write haXe and then you can generate JavaScript, PHP, C++ code. Or in the case of Flash and Nico, actually compile. Of course, compile in the sense of we take source code and generate a binary, a Swift, or a Nico. I think it's called a NK file, something like that. They just execute. All right, so the next one is the difference between Flash Builder and FDT. I get that all the time. And let me see, open up here. So the biggest difference is, the easiest way to answer that is we have a live parser that does not exist with Flash Builder. So if you ever used Flash Builder, just go ahead and do this. If you download a demo or something like that, you create a file and you type in Flash Builder. You're not going to know that all this code I'm doing on my screen here is breaking my application until I save. And when I do save, you only get one error back at a time. And that's because how Flash Builder works is that it actually saves your file, generates a Swift, and then whatever error the Swift says to you, that's what it tells you back. So that's why, like for this example, if my screen is still active, which I think it is, I have 5 errors here. Flash Builder, you only would have one error coming back to you at a time. And you'd be like, oh wait, okay, it says this code is wrong, so get rid of that. Then you have to compile again and be like, oh, okay, there's a line here. Okay. And then I would save that. Whereas for FDT, it's always, we have this parser, it's always running while you type, and so that enables you to very quickly write code and find mistakes really, really fast. There's one that's probably the biggest example. And then the other one is just that we have a lot more quick fixes and quick assists available to you and advanced refactoring. Like, for example, I could do things like, let's see here, extract a constant variable out, right? Or, let's see here, I can do things like select a block of code and extract a method, right? Do things like that. I have things like, 10, like, can we just do a 10? 2, you can do things like extracting local variables. So you have a lot more of those things available to you. Other things like quick fixes, quick assists. So we have something like, what was it? I think 35 or 40 of things that you can do to quick fix or quick assist to generate code for you. So I'd say that's definitely it. So actually, I'll show one here real quick. I'll show. Or go ahead and talk. I'll show another one.
And the biggest advantage, obviously one of the bigger advantages, it starts free. You get almost everything, which is really cool and exciting. All right, this is actually an interesting question that we didn't really ask anyone, but can I limit my application to only work on some mobile devices, such as only on the Kindle Fire? So all this time we were talking about building it for Android in general, but is there a way to make sure that your application will only be presented for people with specific devices? It's such a specific question that, it is a good question though, such as the Kindle Fire just coming out and people wanting to develop just for the Kindle Fire. I think we just have to do a little bit more of research on it, but I think that doesn't depend on our development itself. It depends on the actual platform that sells the applications. So if the application has some configurations that enable you only to show it for people that have specific devices, I think Amazon does have that. I'm not sure about if Apple has that configurations or not, if you could sell it only for your iPad or, I'm not sure. That's just something you have to research into and figure out as you figure out what applications you want your app to run on. By the way, Chris sent us answers to most of the questions, so we'll post them up on our website hopefully later this week. But he had some good answers. And again, anyone that is in our event is going to get a free book. Well, it's not a printed book, but it's a ebook from O'Reilly. We'll send you information about that in an email.